So we start with Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, then making a mandala offering for requesting the teachings. Actually, this is within Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. And also refuge and bodhicitta for correcting a motivation. On the heart of the savior of the 100 deities of the Shitta, on a peak of cloud resembling a clump of extremely white fresh curd, King of Dharma, Omniscient Lost and Drakpa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me, on a lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit from a mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind is the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech, with its excellent explanations, is ear ornament of those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, prostrate. Pleasant drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated, I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Sever was sincerely rejoicing in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy Gurus on the billion clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dhammakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dhamma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I've collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losang Drakpa's teachings to shine forever. Sashi Poki Jun Shi Meto Tamri Rabling Shi Nidegem Padi Sangye Shindu Mikte Owa Mirjoku Namda Shin La Chopasho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of victorious Losang Drakpa, where the morality of an eminently pure way of life was courageous and extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplish the yoga of the 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idang Guru Ratna Mandala Kamni Atayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons, and combining into one, enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of the tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. We will recite the 5-line Mixima verse 3 times. Mi metse wete chen chen rezi, jime kembe wampo jampe yan, dupu malo jomze sanwe da, kanche kembe zongapa, lo sandra pe shamla soa de, mi metse wete chen chen rezi, jime kembe wampo jampe yan, dupu malo jomze sanwe da, kanche kembe tsugen zongapa, lo sandra pe shamla soa de, mi metse wete chen chen rezi, jime kembe wampo jampe yan, dupu malo jomze sanwe da, kanche kembe tsugen Tsongkhapa Losang Drakpa Shabla Soa de.
Sangye Chedam Tsoji Chonla Chanche Vardu Dami Kyapsu Che Dagi Chishi Gibonde Dagi Drolam Penshi Sangye Drupara Sho Sanji Chudan Tsultrim Chanam La Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsunji Dagi Chuji Jibondela Drolam Benji Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Chudan Tsultrim Chanam La Chanchu Bardu Dani Kyabsunji Dagi Chuji Jibondela Drolam Benji Sanji Drupara Sho 강기 투zen이 손에 따와 담제 밤비처럼 담비춘 된제 거담 gel라 창세로 Good morning, everyone. 당한 가진 힘은 참지요. 참되니 시초치스라 가진 참디 드레샤 마신이 잠비벌 균규출 니발니 마신이 잠비벌 균규출 학성다 semgi 레벨 규출로 세 니서
The machine jump par gyur betsu racham dan semgi jevu gyur
Solos. Yeah.
So we are looking at Lamrim Kappa's milling presentation of the steps of the path to enlightenment. We start to look at the section that explains the steps of the path of the great scope, and currently we're looking at the way to develop bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, through the practice of the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions. So we are looking at the way other causes and effects become cause and effect of that compassion. So let's look, make sure that I have the right section. Just come a cheek.
Yeah.
All right. So the way other causes and effects become causes and effects of that great compassion. So this section is 2 points. The way 4 of the sevenfold instructions from understanding as mother through love are causes. That's the first. And the second is the way the extraordinary attitudes and bodhicitta are their effects. So we'll begin with the first one, the way 4 of the sevenfold instructions from understanding as mothers or recognizing sentient beings as mothers through love are causes for great compassion.
데르다 가정님은 아주다 잔주구 쌤 끼고 그랬어. 잔주구 쌤기 싸워디 인지레스. 다 인지티 인지기 넘버디 동하다 타원디비 로치라야 인지당 대화다 덴데기 아니 삼바치라야 장바세기요레스. 다 딘지기 인지다 장바디 이게 미유스레스라운디 감드니 시비다 잔죽 샘고 규르비 닌지다 잠비 미유스레스라운디 심전 탐치 아니 닌지다 잠비 미유라야 샤고거레스 다 심전 탐치라 미기 닌지디 닌지 깨바 쳐발야 수술라 미네 페나다 동하다 수술라 미네 랑 동하 문제바 나시 란동아다 전에 지마로 냠바나신기 신심전 탐질에 미비 닌지 든지지 야 아니 닌지 세건자 감디 닌지 세건자 다디 간다스 끼고 그래스 로다디라다 간다스 끼고 그래스야디 난줄이야 제와도지레
So the section that explains how to develop great compassion is part of the process by which we develop bodhicitta. So we said before that we need to develop bodhicitta. We want to develop bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. We need to develop it. And the root for that is compassion. So the aspect of compassion is the wish for sentient beings to be free from suffering. The wish for them to have happiness. Actually, when we speak about compassion and loving kindness, it is those two wishes: compassion, the wish for sentient beings to be free from suffering, and loving kindness, the wish for them to have happiness. So what is the focal object of compassion? Well, compassion, loving kindness and compassion, acting as causes for bodhicitta, are observing all sentient beings. All sentient beings are the focal object of compassion. So first of all, look at ourselves. When we observe ourselves, we see that we observe ourselves with a wish for ourselves to be free from suffering. So great compassion then is observing all sentient beings and wishing them to be free from suffering. So the question is, how then do I generate this compassion that observes sentient beings, all sentient beings, and wishes them to be free from suffering?
아니 다딘지기 다 인지기비게 가서다 타블럼 될래야 타블럼 만들어 니 그러 아니 주디 더 조지반데 아디샤기 잔주빌 람드는 직 송술직다 야스치고 시월에 아니 전주 나라야 송술직이 송술 만들어 니 연구요레스 더 조지반데 아디샤기 송술 감들 람 중가바기 아니 무스 베이다 독사디 조지반데 아티샤기 송 조지반데 아티샤기 야 아니 주 반덴 다와 타비 숑레야 또니 엄먼주고레야 또니 송구요레스로.
So if we wonder how then do I develop compassion? There are two techniques for developing compassion. One of them was taught by Atisha, the second was taught by Shantideva. Atisha taught it in his presentation of the lamp for the path of enlightenment, whereas Shantideva taught it in his guide to Bodhisattva way of life. So here we're looking at a text that was composed by a Tibetan master, Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa based his text, the middling presentation of the steps of the path of enlightenment, on Atisha's lamp for the path of enlightenment. And Atisha, in turn, based his presentation on Chandrakirti's supplement to the middle way.
다 조지반데 아티샤스는 아니 반데 다와타베기 닌지기스디 아니 탐지 베나 간줄이야 랍무고바 낭기 닌지 여버디 랑기 장람미비 닌지 랑기 닐람미비 닌지디 용구여라스 더 랑기 닌세데디 아니 베나다지 나당한테 레 당보가 차당기 샘 차당기 상원의决定 소리야 아니 통조들이야 단연 발마송기다 통조 숙청부 용대교연사 랑기 닐라 미비 닌지마도 아니 지 발마라 미바 아니 잘라 미바 텔리짱 다 용금 매바인사 아니 닌지 로장조의 신도 카고인사 다 자다 발마세디 자다 닌다 발마세디 랑기 샘기 비타 차당기 로에 따수자 마도 유코랑 원이 단연 발마송기 여친이 트대버직 아니 싸원이니 매바인자 수수 르응원이 년도 따토나 년인바다 르응원이 데테바나 다차르와 요바디 공무여로 차고한자 심전 탐지 년도 따고야디 닌지기비 탑초도 겨와도 심전 탐지 년도 따고야디 다 디송거레스 다 디인자 아니 준비명아 되는 잔 년도 따수직 mixkan da sungu yores ndikaus.
A teacher in Islam for the path of enlightenment explained the way to develop compassion, and he followed the presentation of Chandakirtis in his supplement to the Middle Way. And these presentations that explain the way to develop compassion say that in order to generate compassion for all living beings, we need to work with the natural compassion that we have now. So all of us have a certain degree of compassion that is naturally present within ourselves. So if compassion is the wish for freedom from suffering, first of all, recognize that we want ourselves to have no suffering. In that sense, we have compassion to ourselves in that we wish ourselves to be free from suffering. But when we think of what prevents us from then taking that natural sense of compassion and extending it to all sentient beings, we see that currently our mind is affected by anger and attachment. Our mind is controlled by anger and attachment, and therefore when we regard others, we classify them, we consider them either as friends, which means those who are close to our hearts, or enemies, or strangers, those in between us. Since we have these strong degrees of anger and attachment, we also hold on strongly or forcefully to that division that we have of others, that someone that is close to my heart, or someone that I don't like, this is my enemy, and no, this is someone that is neither a friend nor a foe, nor a stranger. So, so long as we hold on to that notion of this is a friend or this is an enemy, for that long we will not be able to develop compassion also to those people. So needless to say that it would be hard for us to develop compassion to an enemy so long as we see that person as this is my enemy, but also it would be difficult to develop compassion to someone that is a stranger to us. So you can say that the person is not my friend, but also not my enemy. It's just someone in between. So then in order to be able to do that, we have to, first of all, recognize how the regarding of someone as our enemy or a stranger to us is something that a mind does, right? So an enemy or a stranger depend upon how the mind sees them as enemies or strangers. So here, when we want to develop great compassion for all sentient beings, the method is to make all sentient beings be those who are close to your heart. So friends, rather than seeing them as enemies or strangers, to turn all of them to be those who are close to your heart. And therefore, particularly in this section that explains how to develop bodhicitta through the sevenfold cause and effect personal instruction, this method particularly focuses on the way to make everyone become close to your heart.
들딘자다 아니 년도 통일다 마다고야디 라 다 마디 먼저 다 직딩 감기 다 년기 타투바디 년기 촉도 겨바디 라 세월 햄메바 영인디 아니 마트차가도 와서라 다 마장비기 다 랑 링기기 세와 피길이야 햄메바 영인디 패시 마마도 여서마레스 진짜 다 심전 탐지 비기다 마시비 로직에 토바이나 아니 심전 탐지 년도 통비 로직 연구요레스 다 년도 통바이나 년디 동마 존나데 동마다 잔나 찌마로 삼바다 데 대와데 찌마로 삼비 로디 년 통이 로크랑 dob기 연구연자 아니 년기 기소디다 가서다 렐하고 차건자 아니 마시 nenga 침부 송대야디 조 년도 통과인자 마시 더 송구요레스로.
So if we want to turn everyone to be someone that is close to our heart, here we develop first off the recognition of sentient beings as having been our mothers. The point is that if we think of the one that is the closest one to our heart, would be our mother. In that we have this untainted love to a mother. You can say that The only person that we might have this untainted love would be with respect to mother. So therefore, through that recognition of sentient beings as having been our mothers before, we would be able to make them become close to our heart. So if we do hold them as close to our heart, by the force of that sense of closeness, we will have the wish for them to be free from suffering. We'll have the wish for them to have happiness. And therefore, the first step in this meditation technique is first off, to develop the recognition of sentient beings as having been our mothers.
디레시 딘자 땅안주 마디 로 마디려야 아니 랑기 푸툴이야 제월레 메바 요리 세데 디 돌이야 직딩 캄려야 다 네처 망부 요러스라 마기 아니 말려야 다직 던로섬지나 마요리 미나 마요리 자치우이나 무슨 수준나 수수스랑 랑기 마치 용거도 아스라 다디 망시야기 마디기 랑기 푸투티 아니 경당 뒤에 가서도 즉 섬유를 내버려지 진짜 경고여라서 제 지휘인 바에는 야피 있다 즉 부축 그쳐도 된지 깔려지 않지 내 지휘 가시기에 아니 내가도 스케줄이 지휘 가시기에 랑기 부축 경당 뒤 얌첨부 쉬우지 그나 네 가서 통솔을 단다 유튜브 지나가려야 자 쿠쿠세죠 자 쿠쿠 kin통이야 그 부분 경단 통이야
네 생기 창라
같다네 배 니지가 있대 아 자디기 단지 지우춘중지 지우드변한 초카저다 어딘지려야 아니 수수부 창소다 다 자쿠슈디 용치는 그 지우춘중디기 공가 땅세기 나눠려야 권한 공가 땅 조사다 다디 지우춘중디기 하고 오면다 다 쿠슈 용이 공가 찍대 안 코란 공가 찍될 땅치는 조사다 다 지우춘중도 하고 오면다 쏘다 쏘온디 쿠슈기 공가 딩엘라 카다잉거다 다 코카다니 부디기 공가 셴바도서 코랑 두스 베기 초보니 부자 잡잖네 잡을 유샤다 드니 지우춘중도 다대요 코스온디 코 칼라테지 코 셴부쇼 차로다 아니 지상하고 쇼고면 아니 컴퓨터거다
아니 공가 셴바니 졸라줘요
공가 셴바 유샤도 그 캔자시도 원이 캔자시도
so that the mother has untainted love to its children, offspring, so what have you. It's not only present in our human realm, but actually when you look at different living beings, not only human beings, but when you look at animals and birds, insects and so forth, you can see how there's a sense of untainted love or care that mothers have to the children or offspring. It is an inconceivable sense of care. Geshe has seen recently a clip on YouTube about the life of cuckoo birds. So laying eggs in other birds' nests. So another bird, a small bird, Geshe, the clip that Geshe saw was of a small bird building its nest. Then a cuckoo bird comes and lays an egg in somebody else's nest. Then the mother bird lays some more eggs, but the first one to hatch is the cuckoo's. So the cuckoo's chickling hatches out, and then it pushes away the other eggs, of the mother birds, and the mother bird continues to feed it, to care for it, until it flies off the nest. It's too big to remain in the nest, and it flies off. It's really interesting.
자 지우춘주디 파마니가 있다 타마들이야 고라니 공가 시디 찍드네 쿠슈가 아마디기 당번 육샤도 하다 더 숨디 그냠도 샤온디 고란 카 다운디 근데 그 육샤도 하다 단 타마디 지우춘주니디 쿠슈가 보고들래 니가 뭐키온네 전 건격부 쇼지 전부 자로다 다디 토마디 쿠슈기 아마디기 지상샤 신경서 말다디 이내야 수수부글에 제와 요원자 아니 치우신 그 창나로야 샤 대야 비기게 아니 지 다시한 추야게 셔도 찍대네 상무 때문에 찍대한지 송군냠도 코란 공간 찍단지 로샤가 됐디 다 딘디 안타 간지 마이 세와 세디 어 상만로야 딘디 다 얌생우지 요사르 삼삼로 난 딘도 소르송스라.
So I guess I thought that it's quite incredible that cleat. So you see, it is likely that cuckoo birds and mother birds don't really know how to build their own nest. So they just go to other birds' nests and lay their eggs over there. So there were, let's say, 3 eggs of that came from the other bird, small bird. Then the cuckoo mother came and also added another egg to it. So 4 eggs altogether. The first one to hatch was the cuckoo bird. So it spread its wing and kind of pushed the other eggs out of the nest. And all along the other birds were feeding that cuckoo chickling, giving it worms and so forth until it was big enough to fly away. Anyway, Geshe thought that thinking of the cuckoo's mother, thinking that someone needs to take care of its offspring. It has found kind of the perfect scenario for that to happen. I guess I thought that even with that, you can think of this sense of care that the mother would have to its own offsprings.
들이다 베나 차셴바인바나 수수 창나라야 지 공가다 부구도서 베나 아니 뇌칭에 베나 룰라 소바 레온디 아니 부구체도 베 수수 르땅진 비 늘려야 아니 처음이고도 진짜 딘디기다 세월 헤메바 영인디 아니 마디임바디 야샤야탐바 그러 진짜다 더 심장 탐지 마시비 로직 공바이나 아니 낭기 아니 세와 용야치 인지 삼바 용야치 차고서레스.
Or you also can see in such clips of how it is in nature. Then a bird would build its nest and lay eggs. Chicklings would hatch out of these eggs, and sometimes they are subject to predators, snakes, and so forth. And a mother bird can fight off quite bravely, even to the point where it is willing to sacrifice itself for the sake of its chicklings, offspring. So therefore, Geshe says that in that sense, when we think about animal behavior, when we see animal behavior, we can also recognize that also they are capable of the sense of care for the children. So if we recognize that, if we recognize the love that a mother has to its children, offsprings, and so forth, through that recognition, a natural sense of love and compassion will arise in our mind.
Drondi ta kewang hashi ton ta kewang hashi sa di shila shani ani kewa thame ba lang yo ba kewa rila ya mar yo ba du cheon digi ani simjan tamjin di nge ma che nyong ba rin di che ma nyong mare sa gi sawa ni ni khadzu chum mutu ba ma se che nyong wa yin ba di la ya kharso ta riba mang yo ba yin za simjan tamjin ma yin ba di ani those repeat che tam mainza ani chenchembo imba chenchembo ina chen sogo yoba chen soyala ya chen soya delaya ani dewa chimba ta dunga sedel cheba thiri mado shamba chen chisujimenza tindi tone ani ninji da ani chamba ta ninji da chamba slaung diko ani korum meba ani ngela chamba ke chogre 인지 쪽으로 가리고 소소소다 지로래야 가리테나 디고면서 어딘지 토네다 마신이 잠비 팔기다 균규수디 딘디지 차고 왔어.
So then we first of all recognize the this untainted love that the mother would have to its child or offspring. Then when we think of the myriad births that we've already gone through, we can also think that in most of them, we were born to a mother. So we've already been through countless rebirths, and in most of them, we were born to a mother. And then when we look at beings around us, in thinking that we've already had countless mothers, so others have been our mothers, can we say definitely that this particular individual has been my mother before, whereas this other individual has never been my mother? We cannot say that with certainty, but even more so, we can probably have more arguments, more reasons to assume that all sentient beings have been our mothers before, that they've acted as our mothers, and therefore, in the first step, we develop the recognition that sentient beings have been our mothers. And then we become mindful of the kindness that they have extended to us in this situation, in the state of having been a mother. And then we develop the wish to reciprocate this kindness, to repay that kindness. On that basis, we develop loving kindness and compassion towards them. So those stages of developing loving kindness and compassion to others are not definite in their order. It's not that first off you need to develop loving kindness and only after that compassion. You can also develop compassion and then loving kindness. So in that way, we go through a process that begins with recognizing sentient beings as having been our mothers before, through the development of great compassion.
데레자다 딘지게 로종 디게 라 수수 셈려야 아 네가 타투 관계 아니 뒤 관계자는다 팬다 마펜세디 아니 소소려야 라리기여서리스로 간서나 아 간주기 뇌제 탐제 동할기 싸와 탐제디 랑규기 착다 모솜을 때는 정구 여바디 아니 비기 자차 자담바다 네번이나데 임바 네번만이네다 디리 something인기 타치도 비기 착당게 지기 여바들이야 로테 퉁인지 임바이나 아니 마시니 잠비 벌 로정술 디게 샘라 팽구 여바디 아니 서로 챔비 돈이 아니 고투기여서레스 라 가주기 마시니 잠비 벌도 아니 공바 디츠기 랑규기 착단디 땡용을 조그라스 숙총 조그 야차 야타만 조그라스라 더 메바이나 남균이 템지기 따지 아니 깽근 종건 탐지디 뉴모바임바 디나네 차단 모성 임바 지기 직상로지 메나 아니 마신이 잠비 팔도 가주 공바이나야 펜도 가주스 여메 소르투야디 가보비 차고서레스
So then when we think of that in relation to a practice of mind training, on a temporary level or a final sense, it would be beneficial for a mind training text, a mind training practice. And that depends upon our ability to recognize that the root of suffering is anger and attachment within our own mind. When we develop absolute certainty, 100% certainty that the root of all suffering, all faults is within our mind, within our afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and ignorance. We can then on the basis of recognizing how our anger and attachment are the creators of our suffering, we can on that basis develop a stronger compassion and loving kindness towards others. And if we develop loving kindness and compassion towards others, then naturally, anger and attachment will lose their power. So without doing so, still all the faults that we will continue to experience will arise and depends upon our own afflictive states of mind, upon anger and attachment. So without the recognition of how the problems that we experience, the sufferings that we experience, without saying that they arise and depends upon anger and attachment, it will be difficult to see clearly the benefits of developing loving kindness and compassion.
베나 미질이야 콘루 숙청부 사데서 지켜봐이나 콘루 사사기 비기다 아니 미디 니 마이나 만남년비게 태섬 지어봐이나 타직도 콘도사디야디 슈크촌 드라이버 자체 자다 말았다 빈 콘도산다 빈직 독자 최고 삼성디 samlodi tangi mai na men na nyambi tesum jiyo ba ina ani kontro du shuk chon ro ya de ya ja dam wa ta chi du ngi mai re nyambi gi logic ya ba na ani kontro du do ro ya chik o dindi yungu yo sares.
So for example, should you become livid with another person, completely angry, you become livid. If then you think, actually, maybe the person has been my mother before. The person could have been my mother before. Definitely, if you think about it like that, there is a chance or an ability to bring anger down. If you become completely convinced, 100% convinced that the person that you hate or the person that you're so angry with has been your mother, if you're completely confident in that, definitely anger can abate.
Tirda kashi an suzu malaya kontroshu sading in the other tuzugi and my train the changing menza my train the train mashidi ani negabgi pigi namgurjeda negabgi chik sik tomejeda negabgi trending manti ji tone ani malaya ani shedan tawo yede tindi rangi nyen la ya ani ro tachi pe 메셀이야 니진 대원 타마들이야 직식 도메지 돈 드랑교데야 소버도조 아니 차당게 온 조기어마도 원이 로스부닝이 진바이나 아니 가서다 직 시체르 저 체르 줘야지 또 용거로 왔으라.
Now it does happen in our society that we see that some people become very angry with the mothers. Of course, that happens. Some people kind of even hate the mother. Of course, that also happened. But Geshe feels that when something like that is happening, then if someone is angry at the mother, then they cannot really think of the kindness of the mother, the kindness that she has shown to them in earlier stage of their life. So we become angry or hateful of our mother. Can happen because in the relationship, maybe something has been said, that we didn't like her actions, we didn't like some of the words that she said, there were harsh words and so forth. And because of that, we develop anger or hatred. And what that happens is we cannot really bring ourselves to think of the kindness that was there in the earlier stages of our life. In that sense, our mind becomes so orientated, so partial with respect to things that did not go well, with respect to either harsh words or certain actions that we did not like. And anger or hatred or animosity arisen in our mind. Whereas if your mind can be more impartial, when you also think of kindness that was there at the early stages of development, Geshe feels that you can use that in order to still develop a sense of love or care even in that situation.
제 람름 기 나주다 로종 살이야 tik당 거라니 담보 베기다 인지 공구여 와이난자 잠보 공구여난자 소보 공구여 와이난자 가리 임바이나야 아니 녀기 초니 로고도 asra 담보 녀레 미네 인지 공고야 녀레 미네 잠보 공고야 녀레 미네 소보 공고야 다 녀레 미네 소보 공 베노 소보 공야 인지 공 투나 되니 파르말레 미 아니 녀다 파르마니가레 미베다 인지 이다 소보로 소보 쳇롱디 아니 달라 미베 미바 퍼슨 달라 미베다 아니 기술디 곰술디 튀기도 왔어요. 근데 데저 담보 수주기 년 소소리엔 뎁토비 라 아니 년 되게 들려야 다지 소보고마투 아니 닌지 로자마투 와나 아니 디소 샤네 안간주 람람 니시비다 준데 맹아들라야 로장기 슬라바나 가고 쇼지라 제도 쪽으로 되겠네요. 오늘 단에 소주가 있다. 즉 샘의 펜비기 로종 제대 빼마서 가고 있어레스.
Now, when we look at this presentation of the Lamrim, the steps of the path to enlightenment, when we look at the first people that we use, or the first group of beings that we use for the development of love, for the development of compassion, for the development of patience and so forth, first off, we work with those who are close to us, those who are close to our heart. If we develop compassion, if we develop patience and so forth, first off, the objects that we use for the development of these states of mind are those beings that are close to our heart. If we can develop patience to those who are close to our heart, and it gets to a certain level, we can then also extend that sense of patience or the sense of compassion to those who are strangers. And when the degree of patience and compassion to those who are strangers reach a certain maturity, when it reaches a certain level, we can then go on and also extend it to enemies. So this is the order that you find in the presentation of the steps of the path of enlightenment, the order of our practice, the way to develop love, compassion, patience, and so forth. So first off, we begin with those who are close to our heart. So then, if we don't really begin with that, if we don't train our mind in this way, if you don't meditate or cultivate the steps of the path in this way, it'd be really difficult to expect our mind training in steps of the path of enlightenment to be so beneficial.
데레다 데넬 학섬다 샘기 귤귤수 슬라운디 안드감 데레야 닌지다 학섬 세디 이걸로 제단기 옹디 동하다 타나치 마루 냠비기 삼바임바 찍발라 아니 찍라야 아니 닌지 세메 바세디 찍라야 학섬 세데야디 학섬디 비기게 미유 숨진기 동하 비기 동하다 타나치 마루 냠바디 동하다 타와디 다기 책 냠비게 아니 로드 찍라야 아니 학섬 세도스 동하다 타나치 마루 냠비게 삼바델레야 닌지 세메바스 인지 세메스는 더 디톨 어 딘디전 돈 샤기도 와서 더 잔주sem 무스 규칭인디 아니 학섬 인지 세티 고고도 와서 심자탐저 동안에 저거든 이 책이 냠비게 로드디 잔주sem기다 규리스 될 때는 디 제동에 도전하는 모양다 보죠 산지콩을 도버 책이 냠비 로드 잔주sem담아디 데렸다 너 가서다 너 디사로디 데려다 왔어
So we spoke briefly of the four of the sevenfold instructions for understanding or recognizing as mother through love are causes for compassion, and then the way that the extraordinary attitude and bodhicitta are the effects of compassion. So we have compassion, which is the fifth stage, and then we have the extraordinary attitude, which is also called the highest intention. It is also called the wholehearted resolve. So there are different translations for that in English. But this extraordinary attitude and compassion are the same in being compassion, in being the wish for others to be free from suffering. So one of them is immeasurable compassion. The next one, the extraordinary attitude, is not only thinking, may sentient beings be free from suffering. How wonderful if sentient beings were to be free from suffering. It is even more courageous in thinking, I will free them from suffering. I will do it. So this type of compassion that not only wishes for sentient beings to be free from suffering, but the one that thinks, I will free them from suffering, is the direct cause for bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, which means that when we develop the wish, when we develop the thought, I will free sentient beings from suffering, this courageous state of mind leads to the thought, for that end, may I attain the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood. So this mind that wishes for the attainment of complete and perfect Buddhahood for the sake of liberating sentient beings from suffering is what we call bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment.
There is nothing much shu your is Tamboni, Chir Dunga the Tandu Samshini, Simjin Ti Dunga Yang, some the Gay Merchants. Lodi Gil Hawatan, Shudala Dembu Kivalani, Hundu Simjin Ti Donshi, Jela, Pambin number Chinshik to Goody. Niela Dunganjuna Musula, Dal Dunganjuna Gashi, Danye Parmala Dunganjuna, Parcha Yawatovi, Tanim Kiva Sheno. Della Tamboni Yitu Duba Yubi. Inla, Te Chitsam Cheba Tezam Dungala, Muzobayan Tezam the Kidi. Jeba Chungdila, Muzoba Shichonla. Shindu Jena Dunga Tamuya Muzoba Chambuki so. Dala Dungaton the Tandu Mikiva Mase, Tadon Teli Chevatan. Teda Madena Yamba Kivani, Yidumu vi Lenla. Then Yidumu was Shichungi, Dunga Jongala, Gawashi Chechon Euros. Danye Palmi Dunga la Muzubaya Mela, Gawaya Mebani, Yidumu Kaya Mebi Leno. Tedder Chena Sumjin Yendu Gombani, Yunki Vichi in la. Ningi Tadun Mayimbe, Margombata, Tichin Chambata, Telensoa. Sumne Yon to Yidu Wonshin, Chiba Dubji in la. Sumjan la Puchibatar, Hindu Duban Zimbi, Chamban Tesumjin Jewi Ti Ninji Kiba Chedos, Dewa Dan, Tenduji Chambadan, Ninji la Junjeng Eva Manango, Semki Kibi, Gur, Sumjan Yendu Gombandene, Leven Dadadan, Somba Dawadan, Leve Kamalashila Namji, Shadows.
So of these 2 points, we begin with the way 4 of the 7-fold instructions from understanding as mothers or recognizing sentient beings as mothers through love are causes for compassion. And it says, if you reflect again and again on the suffering of a sentient being, this will generally give rise to the mere wish that it be free from suffering. However, for this mind to arise easily and for it to arise very strong and stable, its object must first be a sentient being who has the aspect of being likable and valuable. When someone close to us meets with suffering, we cannot bear it. When our enemies meet with suffering, we enjoy it. When someone who is neither a friend nor an enemy meets with suffering, many a neglectful equanimity rises. In this regard, since our mind finds the first ones as likable, the more we cherish them, the more the suffering becomes unbearable to us and the more compassion arises for them. If we cherish them a little or moderately, our inability to bear the suffering will also be relatively small. But if we cherish someone very much, we find it unbearable when that person meets with only minor suffering. When we see our enemies suffering, not only does the wish that they be free from it fails to arise, but also the thought occurs to us, may the suffering increase and may they not be free from it. That is our reaction to someone we find unlikable. Moreover, our joy at this suffering will also be greater or smaller depending on how much aversion they induce in us. With respect to the sufferings of those who are neither friends nor enemies, we find it neither unbearable nor enjoyable. That is our reaction when someone is neither likable nor unlikable. Given this is so, meditating on sentient beings as our relatives is to make them attractive to us. Since our closest relation is our mother, others are established as dear and likable to us through meditating on them as having been a mother, remembering the kindness and wishing to repay the kindness. The effect of these 3 steps is love that cherishes sentient beings like one's own child. They produce compassion. With respect to compassion and the love that wishes that others meet with happiness, there does not seem to be any certainty as to which one is the cause and which is the effect. These meditations on sentient beings as our relatives have been explained by the Master Chandrakirti, the Venerable Chandragomin, and the Master Kamalashila as causes for bodhicitta to arise.
그래서 이번에 대대로 림기 장비 인지께바나 심진기 텐도 산길라 톰도께바 대점기 초매 바르델 학습 주비 지차 냠나스 심진 대와단 체바다 동아다 타나 냠비 잠바다 인지 체매바는 예라야 여장 심진 탐질라 대와드바다 동아서와 쿨드 셰바니 택젠바 몸발라 메비 인tabki 락 sambal lakbi laksam ki gudi gyulamin dewa lodi jamzu shibin do tambali shisos.
And the next section explains the way the extraordinary attitude, the highest intention of bodhicitta are their effects, the effect of compassion. So it should be sufficient to say that compassion arises based on such a gradual training of the mind, and the desire to attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings arises after that. Why is the extraordinary attitude inserted between them? Shravakas, the ones that we call in English hearers, and Pratyeka Buddhas, solitary realizers, also have immeasurable compassion and the love that thinks if only sentient beings were to meet with happiness, and if only they were free from suffering. Yet those who are not Mahayanis do not take on the responsibility to accomplish happiness and eliminate suffering for every sentient being. Therefore, it is necessary to generate the extraordinary attitude, which is the special attitude of those with brave hearts. This is understood from a quotation from the question of Sagaramati Sutra in the commentary on the Sublime Continuum.
그래서다 대들 숨진 루위 로케바나스 다 학습 기토기 잔축 샘 기술티 순고레스 학습 가레스라운디 숨진 탐제 대화드보다 동어서와 콜드시바 나라랑 제도와 지기 냠비기 아니 로드들이야 학습 세도스 딩지 학습디 아니 태버 침비 강사마도 아니 태버 멤비도 징야라다 좀로 소발레 요마리스 로디키 투요 마레스 마도 심젠라 미니 동할 긴나르 심젠라 미니 동하다 타나 지마로 냠비기 닌지 세메바 베 아니 슈 타부 슈든디 용거스 녀랑라 요레스 거다 녀랑라 요레스.
So the point that is made here with respect to the development of the wholehearted attitude is extraordinary attitude, is saying that there is a type of compassion in which we not only think, may sentient beings be free from suffering. How wonderful if they would be free from suffering. The extraordinary attitude is the one that thinks that this is my responsibility, this is my burden. I will do it by myself. By myself, I will free sentient beings from suffering. So this extraordinary attitude is the cause, the direct cause for bodhicitta. And it should be made clear because the compassion which wishes sentient beings to be free from suffering, that is also found in practitioners of the Hinayana. They can also develop that really strong compassion, wishing sentient beings to be free from suffering. That strong mind that thinks how wonderful if all of them would be free from suffering. So that also exists in Mahayana, in Hinayana practitioners. But then this mind that think I will do it by myself, this is my burden. This is the type of attitude which is called the extraordinary attitude, which is developed along the Mahayana.
Terza nyarang la yobi nyenji tseme basadi nyenji tseme namjuta nyenji tseme slawar chamba tseme ane gawan tseme tanyam tseme sadi tseme badi 까우까우야 간주 미과래야 자대로 근데 망부 용거리네 오늘 자야 됐다 인지기 슉도들야 저 콜에 인지 슉 디디지어스 세 디디지어스 딘디기 세메바 오늘 자네게 다지 아니 인지 아니 동화다 자네 치마로 냠비기 아니 삼바 쯤 마임바 페시 냐랑길에 열 초고사레스 예선나 인지 쯤 마임바 저 비기 쯤바 마임바 인생 뒤주도 낭기 동화다 자네 치마로 냠비 삼바디 냐랑길에 예스 이나야 딘디기 동화다 자네 치마로 냠비 로디토지 나라랑기 책이 냠비 코르 켈드비 로더디다 냐랑라 메바인자 아니 냐랑길에 인지 첨부요 말레스 학섬 인지요 말레스 베시 딘디 도좀 셰고 와사레스.
So then the practices that Hinayana practitioners undertake, Hinayana practitioners are called hearers and solitude realizers. So they also undertake the practice of the four immeasurables, developing immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, immeasurable equanimity. So in some sections of the teachings, some distinctions are made with respect to the practice of the four immeasurables done in a Hinayana way, and the practice of the four immeasurables done in the Mahayana way. And some explanation look at the differences in terms of what the focal object is of the four immeasurables. But Geshe feels that really the difference between the four immeasurables in a Hinayana way and the four immeasurables in a Mahayana way is based mainly on the strength of love and compassion and so forth. In that Hinayana practitioners, hearers and sort of realizes, they also practice compassion. Not only they practice compassion, they practice immeasurable compassion. And Geshe believes that they also reach the point, some of them reach the point in which compassion is an uncontrived state of mind. So they have uncontrived compassion, which is present day and night, in which the mind is always thinking how wonderful it would be if they be free from suffering. How may they be free from suffering? So Geshe believes that hearers and sort of realizes Hinayana practitioners can not only can reach that stage, as some of them develop this uncontrived compassion. But then when we think of the wholehearted attitude, it is not only thinking how wonderful it would be if sentient beings were to be free from suffering. It is the thought, I will do it by myself. This is my responsibility to free other sentient beings from suffering.
taloro jansu shimin dorang shisu tedar simjin zhubi lo jeba na rangi nekam detawi simjin chiki ten yang zobar cha minula ter masa dachomba niji komban topja simjin yon se redang di ten yang tarba tsum drubar nuji tamjin kembalong go minupe simjin ta yeba tang tedagi nekab tang tadu ki ten tamjin zobar sushiki nu nyamdo samba nang 산지 냐치라 니바디여바 시니 숨진기 된도 산지톱도 깨도스 전주쌤께서는 산지톱도 깨도스.
And the text continues in reading, after the mind to free sentient beings has arisen in this manner, you're still unable to complete even the welfare of one sentient beings owing to your current situation. Not only that, even if you were to attain the states of the two kinds of arhats, you would only be able to complete the welfare of very few beings, and the welfare would be to merely accomplish liberation. They cannot establish them in omniscience. So who can complete the temporary and final welfare of limitless beings? If you reflect in this vein, you will come to understand that only a Buddha is able to do this, and you will generate the wish to attain Buddhahood for the welfare of sentient beings.
대대밀로자단 이발을 숨스 현된 등이기 로종화당 현된 등이기 로종화당 잔주 등이기 로종화 잠비드브 심경외송어스.
So that brings us to the actual gradual training in the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions. Now, the explanation of the actual explanation consists of three parts: training in the mind that strives for the welfare of others, training in the mind that strives for enlightenment, and identifying the bodhicitta that is the result of that training.
Tandigi shendu tunyig lo sondedi zo ninjilaya jargiores ra shendu tunyig ndumba sondi ninjilaya jar chanju tunyig ndumba sondi pigige sanji komba tomdig ndumbati da dinni chig gyudang chig pigige chokdaw chejine 아니 잔죽 샘싱이다 용구연자 아니 돈반이다 개체부 쇼진 송여라서.
Now, looking at the outline, it says, first off, we're training the mind that strives for the welfare of others. The mind that strives for the welfare of others, in other words, is compassion. The second point is training in the mind that strives for enlightenment, which is training in the wish to attain the state of enlightenment, which means that here we are training in the two aspirations. The causal aspiration for bodhicitta is compassion. The one that accompanies bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, is the wish or the aspiration to attain the state of enlightenment. So here we are undertaking training in developing two aspirations: the causal aspiration, compassion, and the accompanying aspiration, the wish to attain enlightenment.
네, 배는 인질이야. 샌드 튕기는 돈 봐서 같이 따고 그랬을라온디. 갑들 샌드 세대디. 아니 샌드 되니 셴기 줄이야. 아니 셴규기 냠데. 셴규기 탈바. 셴규기 동화 서비스 세바. 텔이야 샌드 세그레스. 다 디트는이야. 셴 동화의 탄 아니 차와디 셴 동화의 탄은 냠비 로. 셴 동화의 타와 틀리니비 로들이야. 아니 셴드 튕기는 돈 봐스.
You might wonder, why is it that training in the mind that strives for the welfare of others, why is it a name for compassion? So we call compassion the one that strives for the welfare of others. Well, the welfare of others, the purpose of others, you can say, or the welfare is liberation. It is nirvana. It is the elimination of their suffering. This is what the welfare of others mean, right? So the welfare of others is liberation. The welfare of others is nirvana. Their welfare is the elimination of suffering. So compassion is wishing for that. May they be free from suffering.
네, 다 잔줍 튕기는 돈 봐. 잔줍 튕기는 돈 봐디. 시비 잔줍의 카레스 라운데 장줍세디. 견군세 연된 군딩기 산지 공부들이야 잔줍세고레스. 디 튕기는 돈 봐. Sentient 탐지 된르니비 견군세 연된 군딩기 산지 공부들 된르니비 로들이야 잔줍되는 돈 봐스. 디 잔주고 셈다다 촉촉진신 냠도 용돼야지. 어디순 거레스.
Now, the second point is called training in the mind that strives for enlightenment. So this seeking, striving for enlightenment is striving for a state in which one is free from all faults and has all perfect qualities. This is what the state of enlightenment is, and the word for that in Tibetan for enlightenment is chanchu. The first word chang refers to the elimination of all faults, right? So chang is purification, to purify, the elimination of all faults, and chub is the expansion in good qualities, or the comprehension of all knowledge. So then we have an aspiration to attain this state. May I attain that state of full qualities and no faults. May I attain the state of enlightenment. So this wish to attain the state of enlightenment is what we call the aspiration, which is seeking enlightenment. And that is the wish that accompanies bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment.
다 담불은 이스라 샌드드니 로키바 로디 키비기 시드바스 로디 계사기 시 소고 그러서 로디 계버 응어서 담불니 심젠라 셈뇽버 드버당스 심진 용 그 넘버진도 드버스.
Let's begin with the first point that explains how we train in the mind that strives for the welfare of others. Now, this section has 2 points, laying the foundation for that mind to arise in the actual generation of that mind. Now, when we lay the foundation for that mind to arise, again, there are 2 points: achieving an equanimous mind towards sentient beings, and establishing that they all have a likable aspect. Now, when we begin with the first point, achieving an equanimous mind towards sentient beings, Lamrim here gives an explanation of equanimity.
There tambo simjen la sem nyombo drubs laundi simjen la ya ani suzu ngone pi tasuldi nyam gogres tadi nyam ba chebala ya simjen ngone nyam go mebayna yu simjen ngone ani pi nyam ba chig mena ani pa nyam ba tayadi ngoyu nisuda mendem ba chi chagorasra tadi inza 심진 ngone nyambares 심진 ngone danye parmasu ngone ani nyambares na namjinga da chi phomon danyamres ya da ani chi yorada o dinhanshengi nyambares khanasi nyamgres landi so di devan devata dongar mundeba nyambares tinza pa ani donga da tan che maru nyambi semdi samala pha 찬념 전에 따투게 소고 그래서 마도 가실래야 아니 차바단 가실래야 다만기 되바나 소수 농축죠 소수 따다 놀교치 딘디차기도 하더라.
So to develop equanimity, that equanimous attitude with respect to others, it is an equal or even attitude with respect to others, is done when we recognize how sentient beings are equal from their side, so to speak. When we look at them rather than looking at our mind, when we look at other sentient beings, what they are or what they wish for, we see that equanimity is a reasonable approach. Otherwise, if we don't think of others as a basis for developing an equanimity, equanimity will not really arise. So when we focus on others and we recognize their equality, how they are the same, it is in somewhat similar to how we refer, for example, to ourselves in our society. We value more and more, for example, gender equalities, the equality of rights and so forth, right? So we do open our mind to the recognition of how, as human beings, we're equal to each other. So here we also, when we develop equanimity in recognizing the equality of sentient beings, what we recognize is the equality or the sameness in terms of everyone is wishing for happiness and well-being, and everyone is wanting to be free from pain and suffering. Since everyone is equal in that sense, everyone is the same in seeking happiness and well-being and wanting to avoid suffering and pain, then in our mind, we should have an equanimity towards them. Otherwise, when we look at the way that our mind currently behaves, our mind currently has attachment to some and hatred or aversion to others. So when we think about it, when we think of attachment to some people, whereas other people we dislike, we have an aversion to them, it's a mistake because we don't really recognize that everyone is the same in having that basic wish to be well and to be free from suffering.
심지에 ngone nyamba imbayna yulku ngone nyamba imbayna susu lu ngone pa nyamba chita mato bayna ani suikyen res susikyen chazada yulku nguyo nezo tomba chita mato bayna ani ta mato ngendi kyen re mado yulku kyen chagayo maras tinza kanji ninji gom tu me bayna ninji gom mato bayna ani choklong lo choklong choksun jogres lo choksun long jogres lo choksun long tsawi jela ya ani lo ti on the songba na non truk ji lo non truk ji on the songba na ani chawa khan cheba no drog yo ba de gasha gata ma res ro anzu that be said the masun that said norjo ji gya ba na an di to ni lega chi on di lega no drog ras din nan shingi lo ta su de nor to ni songba na ani chawa de no drog res ninza simjen la mi bi ninji goma to ba na non truk di sosu non truk res 간지 안주 인지 고마든 소수 논도 그랬어 거다.
Which means that to develop equanimity, we need to be able to recognize how from the side of sentient beings they're equal. And if we cannot recognize that from their side, they're equal, they're the same, we're not going to be able to make our mind equal, or we'll not be able to develop equanimity in our mind with respect to them. Which means that if we fail to recognize how from the side of sentient beings they are the same, we'll still have a mistake, and that would be our own fault. It's not the object's fault in our failing to develop equanimity. It's the fault of our mind when we fail to recognize that from their side they're equal. And if we then continue with having this partial mind, an unequal mind, and in our pursuit of the development of compassion, we'll still make mistakes. We can see how when the mind is partial and we pursue a particular thing with that sense of partiality, we make mistakes. We definitely, if we have if we turn toward a certain direction and the mind is partial, which is mistaken, and then we act based upon that mistake, then definitely 100% certain that that can lead us to further mistakes. So just to illustrate that with an analogy, suppose that you're taking a particular job, and it requires, first of all, measuring a particular thing and then acting based upon the measures that you have taken. So if you get the wrong measurement, and then whatever you build, whatever you make is based on wrong measurements, obviously whatever you need to do will go wrong. So similarly, when we then think of spiritual practice, the practice of compassion, if we pursue compassion with a mind that is partial, we'll make mistakes in our development of compassion. It will not go right.
예, 심전라 semnyambo drabatan tamji yung namju drabos. Tambunen har kewu chongjingi kaus shabatar. Hondra lo sobe rumbanam. Dirya la kyamar chavos. Tela thomar simjen khachigla chak khachigla dami chogru joba kani semnyambo maduna chambaden inji khankebati chogri chendu keye chogri mebala mini migiwi tanyam gombar chavos. Telayang simjen namla chakdang la sobi nyumu maybe nyumu meba dribi namba chen shikdang ranye simjen la chakdang dan tani sem nyumba nyi sombali dir chimawos dir gombi korumni ki lawar tomar penlo kanya machibi parmashikla migden cheni jesu chakbadan kondrusadi sem nyumba dribar chavos. Tela sem nyumba dribna tenen zashela sem nyumba dribdi tela sem manyambani chakdangi riksu chebao chakba chejongi manyambao tela nyomna dala sem nyumba gomdi tela manyambani tachigdu mintumba teni shedamawo tela nyomna simjen tamjela sem nyumba gomo teni de simjengi ngoneni tamje dewan dungar mendeban sombena 카지라 니어선에 펜도스 카지라 리원선에 네버체바 펜바 메체바는 미릭수 냠바타 랑근원에는 통모 메바니 코르와는 심제 강 렌갸 다기 년도 마기와니 강야 메비 강은 차와차라 강은 다마차냠 삼보 시 공룬 바발레 송소스.
So in reading through the section that explains how Achieving an equanimous mind towards sentient beings. It says the preliminary steps and the like, as explained above in the context of persons of lesser and medium capacity, should be adopted and maintained here as well. To start with, if you do not accomplish an equanimous mind, then having stopped the bias of attachment towards some sentient beings and hatred toward others, any love and compassion that arises will arise with partiality, as they do not arise if you observe them without impartiality. You should cultivate equanimity. The two types of equanimous mind that have been taught are that which has the appearance of lacking mental afflictions such as attachment, anger, and so forth in sentient beings, and that in which there is no attachment or anger towards sentient beings. Here, it refers to the latter of these two. This is the order of meditation by which it will easily arise. Initially, take as your object of attention a neutral person who has neither helped nor harmed you, and develop an equanimous mind through eliminating attachment and anger. When an equanimous mind towards that person has developed, and then you then need to develop an equanimous mind towards friends and relatives. A mind that lacks equanimity towards them is either biased owing to the attachment and hatred, or lacks equanimity owing to a lesser or greater degree of attachment. Once you are equanimous towards friends, you should then cultivate an equanimous mind towards enemies. The lack of equanimity towards enemies derives from hatred that sees them as totally incompatible with yourself. After you have become equanimous towards them, you should cultivate an equanimous mind towards all sentient beings. Moreover, it says Kamalashila's second stage of meditation teaches you to think, since from their side, all sentient beings are the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, it should be unreasonable for me to benefit some whom I consider close and harm or fail to benefit others whom I consider distant. And since for my own side, there is not a single sentient being who in beginningless cycle existence has not been my companion hundreds of times, who should I have attachment for and who should I have hatred for?
야 nyala chabanes pomo dawa chog shupale dag ngunje kenon tamjisi dag ke ngunje she tu gonjen penzu dad sobaye kecha chedar de cha semjen ke she sombata har ngeme yibi kaus she batar janye tamji nyurdu gun royu tsusamdi dene chocha nika doko de jam ni keshi soni chegubi janye lo do mugoji Dani imba gyunzen du cheni chakdan ge riks chebi longo ba yinos.
Also, with regards to attachment to our relatives, the question of the daughter Chandotara Sutra says, in former times I've killed each one of you. I too was slashed and cut into pieces by you. We all have been foes and murderers of each other. How can a mind of attachment arise in you? Think about the way in which friends and enemies quickly change, as it was explained above in the context of the fault of uncertainty. This will avert both anger and attachment. We need to distinguish friends from enemies by apprehending them to be the basis of their respective attitudes. What is to be seized is the mind that is biased owing to the attachment and anger on account of someone being a friend or enemy. The notion of friend and enemy itself does not need to be averted. That's all. Shall we leave the text here for today? Have you got any questions? Questions, objections, Your Honor? All right. If not, we're just going to say the final Lamrim dedication. For my two collections, vast is space that have amassed from working with effort that is practiced for a great length of time. May I become the chief living Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness in the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I've discerned them. May I uphold Buddhist teachings for a very long time, with my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or one spread have declined. May I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by even this graded path of enlightenment, completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings will eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths, never imparted in any of the lives, from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may ocean of prosperity spread everywhere. Thank you.